Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of Women in International Law Distinguished Voices interview series, hosted jointly by the American Society of International Law's Women in International Law Interest Group and the Harvard International Law Journal. It is my great honor to introduce Ms. Maxine Marcus, the 2018 recipient of the Prominent Women in International Law Award by ASIL. Ms. Marcus is an international criminal prosecutor and investigator who has worked for over 20 years in the international criminal law field. She served for 9 years as a prosecuting attorney at the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. Before that, she worked as an investigating attorney in the Special Court for Sierra Leone. Ms. Marcus is also the founder of Partners in Justice International, a legal nonprofit that endeavors to strengthen justice processes for victims and survivors of atrocity crimes in their national jurisdictions. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
So you've clearly had a distinguished career in international criminal law. Perhaps you could start off by telling us a little bit about yourself. How did your background and early experiences inform your choice to pursue a career in international criminal law?
Sure, I'll do my best. Thank you. When I finished university, there was no such thing as the field of international criminal law practice. Okay, there was a human rights field, but even then, essentially, when I finished university, I only knew that I wanted to help people, and I knew I wanted to leave the United States. So I wanted to help people somewhere internationally. That was like as defined as I had it at the time. Looking back, it's really funny, but So I started out just, following a path that ultimately led me to be in Hungary during the Bosnian War. And when the Bosnian War started and I found myself in Hungary, I thought I'd gone to the wrong place. I need to go to Bosnia. But a lot of the refugees started coming into Hungary, and I started working with refugees there. So I received some funding for a very small little project in a refugee camp on the border between Hungary and Croatia. And it was really through running that small project, which was for the women and girls in the teenage girls and the women in the refugee camp. It was really through that project that I was able to say, okay, I don't want to do humanitarian assistance work, such as, providing food and blankets, medical care, etc. I am more interested in policy work or human rights type work. And so then when I handed over that project to my successor, and then I did a master's degree in international human rights, so essentially in international affairs with a focus on international human rights at Columbia. So I still didn't go to law school, and I saw no need to go to law school because I couldn't prosecute war criminals, so why should I go to law school? So I squeezed a 2-year master's degree into one because I wanted to get back to the field. I just couldn't, I just really felt like I needed to be in the field. And then I went to Bosnia. And I started with Human Rights Watch, and it was immediately post-war. And therefore, the human rights documentation work that we were doing was actually war crimes investigations, which also at the time was not a field of study, nor was it anything that you could take a course in. So we did the best that we could at the time. And and I have enormous, and always will have enormous, deep respect for Human Rights Watch, because even in those early days, and now from my looking back point of view, the investigations were carried out at a very, very high standard that we hold up as an example when we teach people how to do international crimes investigations. It was during those few years in Bosnia that the first tribunals, so ICTY and ICTR, got set up. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, I gotta go to law school because I have to prosecute war criminals. So I went back, to school. So I was one of the older students in law school. And I said to myself, I just want to, I had like a very clear goal of going to law school. And I went to Brooklyn Law School. I focused solely on that goal. I did some field work in Chechnya and in Kosovo in my breaks between years in law school. And and finished and then immediately went back to the field. So yeah, so essentially I started in the human rights field, and I've grown, my career in international criminal law has grown with the field itself. So I've been in it since its inception, and I feel so fortunate to have that perspective and to have been working with all the amazing people and organizations that I've been able to work with over this period of time.
That's incredible. Thank you so much for sharing. You have, as you said, conducted a lot of field work, but more expansively throughout your career, your field work has taken place in multiple geographic areas for Chad, Guinea, Guatemala, Kosovo, and many others. How would you say your field-based experience shapes your decisions and strategies in the courtroom itself? And how does your experience in trial and in the courtroom influence your work in the field?
Those are really, really good questions. I think that all my experience in the field directly impacted on how I carried out my work as a prosecutor in the courtroom. And I wouldn't do it any other way. I won't say it was easy. So from giving professional advice to young women lawyers who want to practice international law, I would let you know that that I think doing the field work is a critical part. If you want to practice international law, you have to spend a lot of time in the field, okay? But the field of practice of international criminal law, at least at the international level, meaning international tribunals or hybrid tribunals level, is heavily populated by national practitioners, so national prosecutors who come there with a lot of courtroom practice experience at the national level. And I didn't have any. I'm born in the US. I am a dual citizen, US and German. I never worked in the United States. So I have never practiced, I've only practiced in international criminal law. And so I had a different profile, let's say, coming in to the courtroom practice. I had a different profile than my colleagues did. But, and I learned so much from them. And I hope that I brought also something unique from the field perspective. But the only way for me to be doing this kind of prosecution work is for the benefit of and in service of the victims and the survivors. So the victims and the survivors are always at the heart of the main purpose for prosecuting these cases to begin with. So the fact that I have spent so much time in the field sharing experiences directly with the affected community, I'm sure that it has given me, let's say, greater confidence in striving to serve them and bring them justice. And I think that is it's definitely enriched my life. It's enriched my trial practice for sure. And it now basically is a core part of the work that I'm doing with my co-founder, who you said I'm the founder, but I'm a co-founder, with Kathy Roberts of Partners in Justice International, which is PJI. And this is the core principle upon which we operate, is that everything that we do is in service of the community, the affected community, so the community of victims and survivors.
What are some of the biggest challenges or trends that you see in the development of international criminal law from a more higher up perspective? And how have or do those trends and challenges influenced your career?
Because of the long perspective that I have, where nobody was being held accountable for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide between Nuremberg and when the ICTY and ICTR started, nobody. There was no trial. There was no accountability. There was no forum to bring a case. We had human rights litigation, very amazing human rights litigation being done by our colleagues, but there was nobody being held criminally responsible for these crimes. So the mere fact that started up, if we zoom out, okay, the mere fact that accountability became a thing that now, let's say in Harvard Law School, I am sure 100% that it's like taken for granted that people will be prosecuted for war crimes and crimes against humanity and genocide. And I'm not that old. I remember when I was your age, it wasn't a thing, right? That's an amazing thing, okay? An absolutely amazing development. So, and we need, and I think the international community is the one that got behind that effort. And it's the international community that brought that accountability, right? And so the international system worked. It put in place a mechanism for accountability, and then another, and then another, and another, right? Ultimately leading to the establishment of the International Criminal Court, which, you know, was like a pipe dream when it was early being discussed. You know, the idea that there should be a permanent sitting international court that would hold people accountable if their country was unwilling or unable was like a miracle, nothing short of a miracle at the time, okay? And an enormous step forward. So I have to say, in my career lifetime, there have been enormous strides, and there has been way more accountability than I think any of us imagined could be possible. That's the good part. I think the challenging part in terms of like sort of big picture accountability is that the responsibility at the state level, at the national level, is still in its very early stages. So you do have some locations that stand out in terms of national prosecutions of international crimes in national courts. You have some, but it hasn't kept up at the national level with the scale of advancement at the international level. And I think some of that is political, some of that is about resources, but some of it is just about access and where the effort is made to build capacity. And so that's why with PJI, so after all these years of practice with PJI, we're focusing on building the capacity of national practitioners in national jurisdictions, because international justice is incredibly powerful, but it serves a very small fraction of the affected communities, even at its best. So there is no question, I'm an enormous fan of internationalized justice, okay? But it only serves, even when a case goes forward, there's only a limited number of victims. Even if you have victim participation, you still have a limited community of victims that are being brought justice, and a limited number of perpetrators who are facing trial. And so really the bulk of that kind of justice has to happen at home. That is, I think, where so much more needs to be done. We're trying to take that on, but a fraction of it, but it's got to be a global effort. And that is, I think, so I've come kind of full circle, working in the field in national jurisdictions, then litigating at the international level. Now I'm bringing those two experiences we are bringing to our colleagues, our peer prosecutors, investigators, and victim lawyers who are trying to litigate these cases in their own national courts. And it's an incredible, absolutely an incredible experience.